I'm Graham,
And I'm Corinne, and
and
we
we are
are too
too
talented.
talented. Welcome back to the Too Talented podcast. Today we have a special guest, and this is our first guest, so I'm pretty excited
Woohoo! So
to
exciting.
kind of change the format up a little bit. So this is going to be a lot of fun, I think. So we have Nick Larche, who is VP of Talent for Unanet, PE-backed ERP and CRM software for government contract and construction. I came across him on LinkedIn. We both share a lot on, especially the AI space and how it's changing things in work in general, but especially in the talent acquisition and recruiting space. He thinks a lot about how AI can help solve kind of problems and some areas that we just aren't there yet, even though, maybe some people are talking about different aspects of AI. Um, so Nick, to give the audience a bit about your background, you actually got a law degree from the
Yeah.
University of Detroit. How did you go from that into talent acquisition?
It's funny. I feel like it's the hardest question I have to master the answer to in every interview because everyone wants to know why a lawyer is recruiting or doing HR. Uh,
Totally.
yeah, but I went to law school in Michigan. My wife and I are from upstate New York originally, and we knew we loved our time in Detroit, but we knew it wasn't going to be our forever home. Uh, classic Colorado story. We came out, visited Colorado, went camping once, absolutely fell in love, and said we're moving here. So, one of the things I think I was probably naive about was, leaving my legal network in Detroit, where a lot of people get hired in the area that they study law, and coming to Colorado and having no network, studying for the bar exam for 3 months, and then waiting another 3 months for the results. In which case, nobody wants to hire an unlicensed attorney. So at that point, I was looking for other career paths that could still use my legal skill set, and actually found my way off of a Craigslist job ad, believe it or not, to a 100-person e-commerce software company where their head of HR was their general counsel. So she saw it as an
Wow.
opportunity to mentor what she called very affectionately a baby attorney, and hand off some of the areas of day-to-day HR. And I've just really kind of glommed onto it.
Yeah, absolutely. So HR is obviously kind of a wide ranging topic of things. What made you gravitate towards kind of talent acquisition in the talent space?
Yeah, talent acquisition and talent development. I honestly, the thing that keeps executives up at night is bringing in the right people and keeping the right people. Uh, the rest of it are absolutely critical functions in HR. People need to get paid. People need to have benefits, but they have become quite honestly table stakes to any job. But bringing on the right people and keeping the right people there, making sure that they're thriving, they're growing, they're challenged. Uh, that's the thing that keeps most executives up at night. And if I can do that well, I think I've got some job security.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Corinne, I know.
So yeah, talk a little bit about and curious because I understand and you can tell all the listeners what the growth has looked like at Unanet over the years, but how long have you been there? And then just talk a little bit about like how your role has changed from initially coming in, because I've been in this position where I was the first hire for creating the function. I actually reported to a chief legal officer when I first was hired. So I see that tie. But then, initially coming in, it's kind of like I feel like the first line of attack is like we gotta hire people. We actually have to do the recruiting, and then over time, maybe you can start to build out processes and build culture and build things internally that are more of that framework for the full employee life cycle. How has your role changed, and what has the growth of your own of Uninet looked like over the years?
Yeah, great question, and very, very similar experience. Now, I've just celebrated 6 years here, and when I joined in January 2020, it was about 6 months after they raised a round of capital growth investment from a private equity firm. Um, I had the good fortune of working with our chief product officer once before, and imagine this sales pitch. He said, "We just took out a lot of money to grow the company. There's nobody in the recruiting seat right now. Everybody is doing something different, and we're about to embark on our single largest hiring year in the company's 29-year history. Do you want this job?" And I said, yeah. So that sounded like a really interesting problem to solve. And to exactly what you said, Corinne, it was kind of building the plane while you're flying it, right? I had to get in and understand what is it that teams across the business need in this coming year, knowing it's going to be a huge growth year, how they've been supported historically, and try to move forward with a few quick wins while
Mhm.
also, ripping out a legacy software and implementing a new one, trying to get some interviewer training out the door, and really getting the fundamentals in place, like job architecture and compensation strategies and the like. So, my first year was like running at 60 miles an hour. But as any company grows, you begin to specialize a bit more. So, like when I joined, it was 175 employees. Today, it's 425. Back then, I was I'll use the mountains terminology here, but I was chopping my own wood, carrying my own water as the sole recruiter until I had the opportunity to build out a recruiting team
Mhm.
and actually hire our first full-time dedicated L&D function. And at that time too, throughout that growth, when I started to specialize a bit more, some of the things that I used to do kind of peeled off a bit. Some of the more traditional HR functions or things like compensation strategy, ended up getting delegated over to somebody who is fully dedicated to it. And that's perfectly natural as a company grows.
Yeah. Yeah. How about from the, investor side of things? So PE backed, right? There's a board and, I think a lot of people work for companies like that and the decisions are driven by, kind of those investors. And so I know, well, initially, I guess I had been there. How long had I been there at Cologix in 2020? But the first couple of years, like, there's a big push on how do we keep everybody engaged and together during COVID, and so there was, like that was very much an initiative, but, um, have those in have the yeah, have what the investors are looking for out of recruiting and how that is making a difference within the organization, changed and evolved over the years as well. Cause I've been previously part of an ESG strategy and that was big at the time. And we're only giving you money if you have one. And so, and now it's a little bit less focus on DEI and B and all of that. So, um, just maybe thoughts on kind of how you stay in touch with what matters to the investors.
Yeah, yeah, it's a great question. And I'd say what they need and what they want evolves over, how long they've been invested in that company. And in my first year, at Unanet, was again right after that capital growth investment. And you typically see in that first year a much heavier push on how do you grow revenue, and probably a little bit less focus on things like profitability, right?
Mhm.
So at that point, it was go hire the experienced people, go hire the go-to-market team, go hire the engineers that are going to build the product that are going to help us really increase our annual recurring revenue.
Mhm.
Fast forward, 5+ years, you start to see that balance out a little bit, right? Where, growth, sort of revenue and growth at all costs and profitability become a little bit more one to one in terms of the criticality. And that's where we are today.
Mhm.
I will also say though that, and this is probably, a lot of people might get goosebumps when you hear it because you have a feeling when you talk about AI in the workplace. But private equity firms, especially right now, are looking at are their investments AI first? And they're starting to bake that in to how they are starting to evaluate
Mhm.
their companies and their investments too. They want to be able to see that long term return. So I'd say that being able to hire people who are either very curious about it and they're earlier in their career or have become truly AI first practitioners, that has become significantly more important these days.
That is interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good opportunity to dovetail kind of into the AI discussion, which is, something I'm passionate about and I know you are too. So, there's a lot of talk out there, and I think we've both seen this. There's a lot of people stand up and say AI is going to take everybody's jobs and AI is going to do that. And it's just, a level of ridiculousness when you really start to, unpack what exactly we've got to use right now. So, from an AI perspective, what are you seeing either from a toolkit standpoint or skill set that people are bringing that really is bringing the company forward from an AI perspective?
Yeah, yeah. I think honestly, that first early on was that curiosity, being open minded enough to uh, experiment with it with AI and understand how it impacts your discipline. That's now become I'd say the bare minimum threshold. if you don't actively demonstrate that in an interview process, especially in the technology space, I think it's going to become increasingly more difficult to land job offers. But what I'll also say is that every software that you use at a company is also asking this same question of themselves, and they're starting to slowly release functionality that are, native functionality within their products that you're going to have to get accustomed to. To give an example, my applicant tracking system didn't have AI functionality 24 months ago. And now every quarter that they do a webinar, I'm on that to learn how they are releasing increasingly more embedded functionality into their product because I want to be able to fully maximize the utilization of that. So I think really understanding and being very deliberate about how you're using it becomes critical. But the other thing I'll say is that companies that have been around for the last 10 or 20 years, their advantage is that they already have a customer base. They've got a lot of data. Their disadvantages, they've been around 20 years and they've grown their business under very similar playbooks. There's been increasingly just a ton more market entrants in the AI space and in talent acquisition. I'm sure you guys have seen this, but it used to be, I want one solution for all of HR and all of recruiting. And then we went through this phase of, new HRSs and new applicant tracking systems coming to market. And you want the best of sort of the best of breed that integrate. And then it kind of swung back to one solution. And now in recruiting specifically, they were breaking every part of the interview pipeline apart to solve a new problem with an AI technology to the point where if you're a candidate going through an interview process, you actually may be interacting with or interacting with the result of AI half a dozen times from the point you apply all the way to a point of offer. And they're all different technologies. It's super fascinating.
Yeah, that's interesting. So have you, I mean, I think one of the things that I've seen in kind of my use of AI is where it works and where it doesn't. And I won't call any tools out, but I have a tool and access to a tool that consistently gives me, like, I'll put in a search string with it and it'll give me, hey, you should check out these 5 candidates first before you dig into the people that, popped up manually.
Mhm.
And they're never good. I mean, they always have some type of where I'm like, what is this? Like, I'll be searching for a Java developer, and like the first candidate that pops up is like .NET all day, and you're like, this is absolutely not what I'm looking for. So that's where some areas where I've seen it have some struggles. Where have you seen it have some really great successes?
Yeah, great question. We use a kind of a similar technology for applications right now that I think one of the things that a lot of recruiters are facing is you open a role, you might have 800 resumes in a week. And I imagine many of your people who are listening to the podcast today, they see a LinkedIn job ad and they already see 100 people click apply to it, right?
Yeah.
Um, imagine sitting down in a recruiter's seat, all of a sudden you've got, 20 openings and each opening's got 500 or more resumes. Like your recruiters are just overwhelmed and they ask themselves, where do I start? Uh, to the point where even kind of traditional things like application windows. This is only going to be open until March 1st or something like that.
Mm.
Are kind of coming back. But I'll give you one I thought really interesting win that we had with that technology. Um, there's a couple of things that a recruiter can do when they have 500 resumes. They can turn off the job ad. They could turn it off significantly sooner. They could just not post it externally and spend their time trying to proactively reach out to people on LinkedIn or any other sort of medium. But here we had a use case where we had over 1,000 resumes. And after you hit that point of saturation where you're probably not going to sit down and review every single last resume, we had maybe half a dozen or more candidates in process, but we had that technology still running so that even though we had people in the interview process, let's say for 25, 30 days, it elevated somebody who applied that was still amongst 800 other resumes and said, you should try to get this person an interview. Uh,
Mm.
so out of 800 resumes, even though we're already interviewing, I was able to elevate somebody out of that pipeline and get them an interview. That person made it all the way through an interview process into an offer where, a recruiter could have just said, I'm just turning off the inbound or I'm just going to decline all because I got half a dozen people in process. To me, I think that's, powerful.
What is that technology, if you could share it? And so yeah, I mean, to your point, like it's not a bad thing to have that many resumes. It's just a matter of figuring out of those, who do we really want to talk to? Because the more volume, the more likely there's somebody with everything you're looking for, right?
Right.
So yeah. Could you talk a little bit about like what did you have to? Is that an add-on, technology?
Yeah, great question. So it's a company called Endorsed. They're out of
Okay.
California. They are an integrated partner with our applicant tracking system that we use, because our applicant tracking system did not offer that functionality.
Hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
again, here's an example of somebody coming into market with a really good idea, a tough problem to solve, and then beginning to push these applicant tracking systems to go and develop that embedded functionality within their own products. But yeah, we started leveraging them mid year last year,
Okay.
and it's super interesting. It's not so different from, you think about prompts that you put into a chat GPT or
Mhm.
similar. Imagine, a recruiter putting in 10 skills based prompts into it to be able to elevate those candidates. Must have experience with,
Yep.
a modern JavaScript framework, let's say, and it will elevate people who've got examples on their resume in Angular, React, or something similar. And that's just one prompt. But doing that across 10 at one time is able to bring those people to the top who are the most relevant results to a recruiter to want to pluck out of the inbound and schedule an interview with. But I'd say that the other thing that they're solving is a really interesting problem, and we're seeing it left, right, and center right now in the market, and that's candidate fraud. And that is something too that is impacting job candidates just as much as it's impacting recruiting teams right now.
That's interesting. So for every position that you've got, if you're running this tool on the side, basically you create prompts around, hey, these are the things that we want to see in someone's resume. So run through all the candidates, and then we're looking for these 10 skills, and we want to bubble those people up to the top. Is that right?
Exactly. And it brings it a lot more rich context that, when you're trying to put together a resume, how many of us have been like, oh, you got to keep to 1 page or I got to keep to 2 page. And we leave context out. It's smart enough to say things like, if I put in a prompt that must work for a publicly held company, let's say, chances are we're not putting our current employers are publicly held on our resume.
Mm,
But it's
yeah,
smart enough to read that and actually elevate those resumes that have that based off of the companies that they work for.
that's so interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
that's really great. Um,
And what is the ATS that you use, if I can ask, and why? How'd you decide on that?
Yeah, so I've been using Greenhouse now for over
Yeah.
10 years.
Okay.
I feel like I should be on a commission plan for them because I'm always
I've
um,
used Greenhouse, but I've used a lot of different ones, and so I was curious what between Taleo and Oracle and PeopleSoft and, yeah, lots of, and demoed a lot, but yeah, Greenhouse seems to be, especially for smaller companies,
yeah.
like a pretty ideal one. So you found that they integrate well with all these other tools as also.
They do, and
Yeah.
they have. I think they've taken, of most of the applicant tracking systems out there, they've taken a very deliberate approach to saying, interviewing is a really human process. We don't
Mhm.
want to be so AI heavy that element gets lost. So they've been very deliberate about what they've rolled out, and I think that's been very very clear in their just their product maturity.
Mhm.
But they do integrate with several other AI driven technologies.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the places that it's so important that there continues to be human interaction is the actual interview. I mean, you hear about kind of AI chatbots that can do the interview for you, but anytime you call in the customer service for, like, let's say your credit card, you don't want to talk to the machine. You want to talk to a person. It's, you want someone to help you solve the problem. And I don't know if there's a belief that a machine can actually do that. And I think that adds to, people don't really want to talk to a robot to interview. They want to talk to a person who's going to make some decisions about if they move forward. And I think that human interaction is so important. So that's one of the places that I think talent acquisition and recruiting always will have to have some level of human interaction just to add warmth to the process, if nothing else.
Yeah, I've got an interesting share on that,
Yeah.
where we're actually in pilot phase with just that kind of technology right now.
Okay.
Because I honestly am very curious about what its potential is. And I was surprised to find out how many candidates have said, this is like my sixth or seventh interview with an AI bot. Uh,
Really?
where I was like, yeah, I thought this was really, early emerging technologies, and to some extent, I think it is. But
Yeah.
I think candidates are starting to see that on the job search right now is that these aren't necessarily meant to be a replacement for interviewers, I'm almost looking at it like, how do you bring a resume and cover letter to life?
Hmm.
It's like an
Hmm.
extension of their application. So we're just in pilot phase, very, very early, limited, data to work with. But we've taken that approach of, we're a technology company. We want to keep technology focus in much of our processes and workflows, but human judgment is always going to be at the center. You're going to be invited to do this interview. It's only 3 questions. It is with an AI agent. But before you even get into it, there's a couple things you should know. There's a recorded video of me talking about the company, talking about the role.
Hmm.
And we've given a lot of context that if you actually ask the AI agent questions, it will respond with our answers. Things like, how big is the company? How long has it been around? Can you tell me about the culture? So we try to make it a little bit more interactive and dynamic.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow.
Super interesting.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But again, very early. Some of the feedback has been, you're probably going to get a lot of rambling in my responses because I've never had an interview with an AI before, and other people that have said this is becoming very normal.
Interesting.
That is so. It's wild.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of reminds me of like I think there were companies in the past, or I've seen companies that used to want you to upload a video.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So like it's kind of like that, only with a somebody on the other,
It's almost
something
like
on the other
someone's
side.
prompting you
Yeah,
in your video, which
yeah.
actually could work really well.
So do you see it more as like that initial, like almost replacing a recruiter screen type? That's where it fits within the process.
I kind of look at it as like an extension of that process. So
Yeah.
I mean, much bigger companies might have your just quick 5 to 10 minute resume recruiter screen.
Hmm.
With us, we're a little bit smaller company where we like to do deep dives on our initial interviews. So the way we're looking at it is, let's say I've got 500 candidates apply. I can invite 20 candidates to interview with this AI agent. It gives me just a little bit more context to narrow down that 20 to
Mm.
5 that I'm still going to get on a video call with or a phone call with,
Okay.
and to have a 30-minute deep dive conversation with. I do think for anybody who's on the job search, what that means is you're about to get a lot more interviews. They just might not always start with a human, which is
Yeah.
crazy.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Which could be a good thing. I mean,
Yeah,
it allows, people to probably jump into a process faster because you're not waiting for someone else's schedule to open up to get scheduled. Boom, you're
right.
in the process with an AI tool instantly who obviously doesn't have a schedule. So that in itself could speed everything up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, that's one of the things that we communicate when we send that out is, you have a week to complete this. You can complete it whenever you want. But a human on the other end is the one who scheduled the questions, the one who's going to grade the responses, the one who's going to review, transcript or audio or whatever, and make the selection decision for moving forward. So that's probably one of the bigger misnomers right now, is that AI is making the decision not to move me forward. Humans should be the one who's behind that, making all those decisions.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
sure.
I mean, I have like 8 questions that came to mind based on all of that, but like the one that came to mind is that it sounds like this is ideal for if you have a huge amount of applicants. But what about the flip side of how would you look to possibly be using AI if you have a super niche role that you're not getting applicants? How then does it come into play when you need to go find people?
Yeah, yeah. I honestly think the AI agent, like, bot interview experience takes a backseat in that type of scenario when
Yeah.
you don't have a lot of candidates in your pipeline and you need to be very, very personalized in your outreach. I
Mhm.
mean, I can't imagine many people, if I reached out to them on LinkedIn saying, "I'm so excited about you. Talk to my AI agent.
Yeah,
Have you met my AI friend?" And
We'd
I
really
would
like to
imagine.
talk to you, but not us. We like
Yes,
your AI.
yeah, I imagine that the responses would not be with a lot of excitement or enthusiasm at that point. So,
Yeah.
I do think in that regard, where AI does come into play is being able to find those candidates, being able
Yeah.
to craft messaging. One of the things that we have started to play around with here too are things like um, marketing caliber outreach assets. One page, not a job description, but something that if you open it up would tell you something about our culture, the opportunity, why you should even say yes to talking with me.
Yeah.
And then also things like interview prep guides. There's a lot of uh, different schools of thought on interview prep guides, but AI has the ability to be make us a lot more educational in our interview
Mhm,
processes.
mhm.
And typically, research finds if you're being very educational in your recruiting processes and candidates are informed, they're making decisions that net out better tenure, higher performance, and the like.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Um, Moving over to kind of like the candidate side, one of the things that I've been noticing, especially so far this year, is a lot of people in the job market. A lot of people are frustrated with it. I'm seeing a lot of people put out, hey, send me your resume and I'll optimize it for kind of VMS and AI, or, even reverse recruiting. I'll represent you to a list of companies and you pay me a fee from the candidate side to do it. And there's always a fee involved with it. What are your thoughts around that from a candidate perspective? Should people be, in your opinion, buying into something like that? Or do you think that's, wasted time and money?
Yeah, I'd say if they're wholly unfamiliar with it and they don't even know where to start, a lot of candidates have been going to resume coaches for years.
Mhm.
What I will say is that these technologies are becoming easier and easier to use. There's a very low, barrier of entry. Most of these, I mean, some like ChatGPT's got free accounts, and it's fairly easy for you to do it yourself if you have a sort of baseline understanding of what you're asking the technology to do. Um, my personal opinion is I would rather experiment on my own and figure that out for myself than paying somebody else to do it. Not to mention, AI is making it so easy that you're going to see a lot of those companies open up. And where do you start? Who do you trust? I think it becomes a big question. So if it were me, I would do that on my own. And I wouldn't upload things that got a lot of personal information into it. It's one thing that people don't really understand
Mhm.
when they access a free account is you actually have security settings in there too. You don't want your content to train their models. And you don't want to have your phone number, your email address, and stuff out there. But you could say, hey, I'm a vice president of talent at a 500-person software company. Here are the 5 bullet points I currently have on my resume. What would you refine to position myself better for a vice president of talent role elsewhere? That's the type of prompting and functionality that's pretty easy for anyone to do without having to pay anyone for it.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And I'm also kind of hearing from the candidate side of things that it might be beneficial to like thinking about, yeah, when you said the one pager and like keeping your resume to one page, it might be beneficial to have maybe a one pager, but also an expanded resume.
Mhm.
And maybe you use both when you're applying, just in the off chance that company is parsing out and going deep on resumes and using tools like your company to look. So and I don't know. It's almost a shift from, like, less is more to maybe you do wanna have as much information in there as you can, as well as something that's short and sweet in case a recruiter just needs to review that.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. I
Yeah.
still kind of look at like the sort of the two source model of my resume is an advertisement doc. It's going to highlight most of my experience, but it's not going to be so comprehensive. You're going to learn that more probably either from my LinkedIn profile or from me in an interview.
Yeah.
But I need to give it enough context that yeah, I do get selected for that first interview.
Mhm.
Something that's super interesting that I've been playing around with too with AI is you can actually ask it to interview you,
Hmm.
Hmm.
and that's
Oh,
super
that's it.
interesting.
Yeah.
That's
So, like,
crazy.
you could say I'm a vice president of talent at Unanet. I'm pulling together, my job. I'm seeking or my resume. I'm seeking my next opportunity in XYZ or whatever. Help me build out my resume. But before you do, ask me 5 questions, 1 question at a time to, you know, basically, shoot out the best output possible. And it will do back and forth interview questions with you to actually give you a much better output than if you
Oh,
just
that's
said, "Draft
that's
my resume."
super
That is
fascinating.
super cool. It's like almost a way to prep yourself for an interview.
Yeah,
Huh.
absolutely.
Yeah, that's really cool. One of the things, and I wanted to highlight this because I thought it was so cool that when you posted it, yeah, a couple weeks, well, maybe a month ago, you had posted something about having candidates who interview with you. and maybe they don't get selected for
Mhm.
that particular job, but maybe they're the runner up. And you've found a way to flag that person in your ATS to come back to them the next time that job is open. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? Because it's not something I'd ever really heard anyone else say, and how powerful that could be for kind of building pipelines for the future.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I'll caveat it with it wasn't my idea. Yeah, I hired an agency guy who worked with me for the last couple of years, who said we should really be doing this. And I was like, why haven't I thought about that before?
Yeah, right.
That's okay. There's as someone said recently, there's no original idea, so it doesn't matter. It
Yeah.
probably wasn't his idea either.
Yeah, but I think it's such an interesting concept, especially when you're finding yourself recruiting for a similar role, pretty regularly throughout the year or
Yeah.
over the years. But rediscovery in an applicant tracking system is something that recruiters don't feel like a lot of applicant tracking systems have solved. I think it probably gets better down the road, but I mean, you think about it, you see 500 people apply to a job. I've been using the same ATS for 6 years. We've probably hired over 400 people. So I mean, imagine how many candidates I have in my system, right? And it's already hard to search within it. So being able to tag as a silver medalist was somebody who got all the way through our interview process, who didn't get the gold, right? But who could be the gold medalist on the next run, right? And I want to be able to bring those people up very easily because those are the people I want to call first and
Yeah.
see if they're still interested, if they're available. And one of the things that we try to do here is have these, I call them candidate advocacy calls towards the end of the interview process, where you do give feedback to people who made it all the way through the interviews, especially if it's somebody that you would hire in the future. Because if you just send them a canned rejection email and you don't honor that relationship that you've built over several weeks, yeah, silver medalist or not, they're not going to want to re-engage with you. Uh, so yeah, that's how we came up with it. And I also try to be very empathetic to candidates that no one wants to hear you came in second, but people do want to hear we thought really highly of you and we
Yeah.
would hire you. We just don't have a role for you today.
Yeah.
For sure.
I literally just called somebody yesterday to tell them that because it was like that was the feedback from the manager is this person is amazing. And if we were just a little more built out in this function, I would hire him. Like,
Yeah.
and so that's what I told them. And yeah, like it's not what they want to hear, but it's also like you did all that work. Why not maintain that relationship for the future? But
Right.
tagging them as a silver medalist in the system also like, yeah, that's super, super smart.
Well, and such a huge differentiator. I mean, you hear all the time, oh, I went all the way through an interview process and then got ghosted at the end. I don't even know what happened.
Yeah.
So to hear that you guys are doing calls with some of those people, that's a huge advantage. And, once again, a way to pipeline future talent that you could bring into the organization and keeping that relationship and building a relationship where so many companies seem to be falling down in that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
That's interesting. Okay. So, as we start to kind of wind down here, one of the interesting things I noticed on your LinkedIn profile is that you're a very avid reader. Like you read a book a week, avid reader, which is a lot, especially in comparison. Like I was reading something that was saying that readership is down significantly, especially over the past 20 years. And I think it's stuff like, your phone or actually it's probably just your phone, where everybody spends time looking at news and social media and that type of thing. So reading has kind of gone out the window in terms of books. So an interesting question someone asked me during an interview, and I'll ask you too, if you had to recommend just one book of all the books you've read over the last, let's say 5 years,
Mhm.
what would it be and why?
5 years.
I don't know. He reads 50 books a year.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it's a tough question. It's like the equivalent of asking somebody what's your one favorite movie, right?
Right.
It's really tough. But
Yeah.
I'd say the one book that I've recommended that I've gifted several times is a book called "100 Years of Solitude" by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. It's fiction, Latin American literature. I was a liberal arts major back in college. I was not pretending to be a writer or even a heavy reader at that point, but I took a Latin American lit class. That was one of the books that we had read, and it's on my shelf. I've read it more than once. But it's just a fascinating story. A lot of like magical realism in it. And I don't know, I think it's also one of those that Latin American literature is very deep in the lessons that they have.
Mm.
So it imparts a lot of life lessons too.
That's awesome. That's really cool. And once again, what was the title of the
100
book?
Years of Solitude.
100
100 Years of
Years.
Solitude.
Okay. Awesome. And what country does it take place in?
That's a good question. I know it's a fictional town called Macandia, but I cannot remember the country specifically.
Oh,
But
it's a fictional town.
it's
Cool.
it's worth a read for sure.
Okay.
Marquez is a hell of a writer.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Very cool. Any last minute follow-ups or anything?
No, I mean, I think there could probably be a part 2 and yeah,
Yeah,
go
we
deeper
should.
on things, but this is super interesting and congratulations on all the growth and success at Unanet. And it seems like you're on the bleeding edge, cutting edge of trying all this cool stuff, but also empowering, recruiters to stay human within the whole process, which is amazing. So I think no, it's very, very interesting and really appreciate your time.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate the invite to be on the pod and too talented. You make sure you subscribe and continue listening. And I'm not being paid to say that, so
No, awesome. Well, thanks for joining us. We really, really appreciate it. And perhaps there will be a second pod talking a little more. But yeah, thanks everyone.